You've been looking for a podcast to help you transform your physical and mental, one that'll shoot you straight between the eyes with truth and no BS, helping you have the right mindset to accomplish things, the iron will and fortitude to follow through with what you say you're going to do. No excuses. Mark owns martial arts schools, and after 30 years, he has some real insight for real talk, real life, real conversations, motivational, fitness, self-defense, weight loss, live from the Great 1-8. This is Real Talk with Mark Cox.
All right. Good. Well, it's good morning for me, Scott. I just found out that Scott is actually broadcasting from Germany. And so it's 6 p.m. out there. Yep. It is 9 a.m. out here in California. And so good morning and good evening all at the same time. It's amazing that we can be on opposite ends of the world and talk like we're right next door to each other, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's pitch dark out here and getting ready to call it a night here. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. So listen, today, guys, our guest, this is, if you guys haven't met me before, we have some new people popping on now. So you guys, the comments are right off. You're welcome to comment as we're going through. If you got any questions for Scott or myself while we're going through our interview, you're welcome to bring it up and we'll put it out there for him to answer or myself. And with that, no further ado, Scott, I want to go ahead and let you introduce yourself. Okay. Now that we know that you're, just so everybody knows, he's still deployed. He's deployed right now. I didn't know he was in service. I thought he was out of service now. But Major Scott, go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience.
Man, thanks, Mark, for having me on. And that intro video is awesome that you've got there. And so I'm currently serving. I'm a reservist that's on an active duty order right now, a deployment out in Germany, and we are, my mission is to train Ukrainian chaplains. And so we've got them coming over periodically throughout the year. And so I've been here since August, so right at almost 3 months, and really just getting settled in. And, it's the first time in a long time in my military career that I enjoy what I do. You don't always, the grunt work sometimes gets to you. And so I love teaching, I love coaching, and I get to do both of that while I'm here. And then, of course, I run the Go Boldly Mastermind groups that are for men. And so those are small groups of 10 or less men, that high-level mastermind groups that meet once a week. And so truly excited about that, because I think that in today's society, we need men to step up and be bold. And it really kind of goes along with your beyond the mat, no excuses. And that's, men are giving too many excuses, and I think you used the word wussy earlier for something. Yep. I think that's
100%, and that's with a W, and it's usually with a P. So to be honest with you, but I'm going to keep it PG today because our pastor's here, right? So we have a chaplain here today, so I'll keep it. Well, it's not like you haven't heard it, man. I was telling everybody that's online here, it's unique that Scott works in the chaplains division of the military, because that is exactly where that's a major part of who we helped in Hunter out in Georgia. That's the chaplain's assistants, and the chaplains is who we trained with our Krav Maga. And I think I told you before that we had a ranger named Joe. He's out of service now. He just retired, and he's been deployed several times. He's just a combat ranger, man. He's a go-getter.
Yeah.
Good Christian guy, but this warrior ended up going into the chaplain's corps, and he just brought a whole new mindset to the chaplain's corps to help chaplain's assistants make sure that they are safe on the battlefield and they can and know how to defend. And I think I was telling you before, I said I always found it unique when I was in there to train the chaplain's assistants, that the chaplains were better than the chaplain's assistants ever could be. It's probably going to be a flip-flop. Who's going to save who when the fit hits the shan? You know what I mean?
And I think some of that comes down to just a presence of mind, lack of self-awareness. So many of our chaplain assistants are very young. Fortunately, I've got an older guy right now that knows his stuff. Unfortunately, he's going to retire next year. But when I travel, Johnson goes with me, and especially when I'm in country here. And so even though we're not, actively at war, there's still that sense of the enemy knows that I'm not carrying a weapon, and they're gonna come after me first. So.
Yeah, they know that. They definitely know that the enemy's still the enemy. So Scott, before we kind of go on, because I'm very interested in your men's health and your masterminds and stuff like that, but I think that this is a unique thing that people don't really understand about in the military. When you say that they're going to come after you first, why don't you explain to the audience what that looks like what it is for a chaplain? They may not know that a chaplain, and it doesn't matter denominations, whatever denominations it is, they are not allowed to carry firearms in battle. And that's why you have an assistant. Why don't you go ahead and explain what that looks like?
Yeah, so we take an oath to perform or provide, regardless of denomination. So, soldier comes to me that's Wiccan or Islam or whatever faith background, and I am committed to performing or providing whatever service that they need. And part of that, when we go to war, there's an expectation that chaplains will be down where the soldiers are, where the military personnel are, down on the battlefield, down at the line where everything is happening. We're carrying no weapon. Now we can wear battle rattle, we can wear all the gear, but you still have got to protect yourself, and that's where the chaplain assistant. I always say that I want the biggest, baddest redneck that shot about 15 deer in their lifetime to protect me, because if they can shoot a deer from 250 yards away, they can shoot the enemy for me and protect me. And so that's what I look for. And so my last chaplain assistant is
I think that,
and he was big and bad, and I love going into Jordan and Kuwait with him, because he was definitely going to protect me.
Yes, that is right. So you had, like I said before, you had two types of men or women in there, man. You had these chaplain's assistants that's all about it.
Yeah.
And then like Joe, if you trust me, if Joe was your chaplain assistant after all his deployments, yeah, you'd be pretty safe.
Exactly.
Matter of fact, the whole platoon would have been safe if he was out there. To be honest with you, he was just he's just a bad boy, man. So it's good. Well, hey, listen, man, we need to protect God's soldiers,
Absolutely.
Plus you have you have the hand of God on top of you, on top of it, that's the one that counts, right?
Exactly. And every soldier should understand that when they sign up, that they're basically saying, I'm willing to give my life. And that's an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of military personnel that sign up and don't have that mentality. They don't have that expectation. But I knew what I was getting into when I signed up. And that's what I try to explain to every young soldier coming in. This is what you've signed up for. Toughen up.
Yep. It's absolutely. It is. You have to have a warrior's mindset inside there for sure.
Yeah.
It was just so I got to I worked now for almost 2 or 3 years with the military, and it was a little different for me. They brought us in because of our Krav Maga, especially with weapons retention and stuff like that. But working with the military has really spiked our awareness, because we did so much scenario training in the shoot house that it was like, wow, some of this stuff works and some of this does not work, especially when you got battle rattle and everything on. Okay. There's you get knocked down and you're like a turtle, you know what I'm talking about. You're like a turtle on your back of your shell. You're like, what the heck, man?
You're weighing about 50 to 150 to 75 pounds extra weight carrying that stuff. Yeah.
Right. So, going through that, it really kind of helped hone my skills a little bit more for that, and enhance what we had anyway. So it was such a good time in there for me, and such a unique thing. I got some really cool gifts from those high-end officers too, for what they did. And I got this compass, this true north compass from the chaplain's assistant
Nice.
Probably one of the coolest things that I ever, of course, awesome challenge coins and all kinds of stuff, because you get all kinds of guys from different places that come in. And I had this one unique coin that had an alligator on it. And I'm like, and this guy's this guy is a hard charger, man. This kid could fight. And I'm like, what's this alligator about? And he goes, oh, Mr. Cox, you won't like this. It's, we had a pull-up bar in a mud pit. And he goes, one time in the mud pit, there's an alligator.
Oh my gosh.
And one of the guys took that alligator out and killed it. And then they put the head in the mess hall when they go eat. And he goes, that's the alligator head on the back of the coin. I'm like, oh my goodness, these guys are freaking choking out alligators and killing them, putting their heads on the wall. Those are my kind of guys.
That's what I call badass.
My kind of guy. I said such a unique stuff in there, man. It was so good. It was so good.
You never know what you're gonna come across, and soldiers are notorious for pulling pranks on each other, and so you never know what you're gonna get.
100%. Yeah. That's so true. So true. So now you're in service. Now you're reserve right now, but they called you up now when you say you're helping train the Ukrainian, do they have the same? Do they have the same kind of? Can they have weapons or can they not? Is it across the board?
No, they don't carry weapons either. I would imagine that they're probably, because they've really just thrown their chaplain corps together within the last year. And so they are, in essence, we're teaching them, and along with, the UK has got some trainings for them, and the Netherlands have got some trainings for them. And so they're kind of going from different country, but we're in essence training them how to set up their chaplain center. We're teaching them how to be soldiers. We're teaching them how to counsel. We're teaching them how to get their soldiers back in the fight. And as I was telling you before we got online, their war is different than our war that we've ever fought. The wars that we fought have been Iraq and Afghanistan, where our soldiers went there, left their families behind in their house and their normal communities. Our soldiers went to Iraq and Afghanistan. These soldiers are walking out their back door, sending their families away. They're sending them here to Germany. They're sending them to the U.S. They're sending them to Canada. And they're walking out their back door to fight this war. And they, the biggest thing that each one of them continues to tell me is, I don't know if my family's coming back, which is different because a lot of our families in the U.S. are always saying, well, we don't know if our soldiers coming back. But
right.
A lot of these families are finding new lives in other countries. So they're fighting a multiple battles, a mental and a physical battle at the same time.
Yeah, that's tough. That's it's a tough pill to swallow, because we just don't have, not that I can't see that happening on our soil here, but such a different, you're right. That's just a different thing. Your family is being attacked on your own soil. And I'm sure that the stress levels are high, and I'm sure the chaplains are really needed in this time. Are you, when you're training them, are you training them, for consulting? Are you training them for training? So what are you doing here?
The majority of them are priests. They're coming over here. They're coming to Germany. We've got a camp set up where we put them up in tents, and unfortunately they get to eat MREs. So they do get a hot meal at night in the DFAC, but they're not staying in a hotel when they come over. They're not getting the best the best living arrangements. But so when they come over, we've got a 2-week training that we've laid out where we are talking to them about how to be a soldier. We are talking to them about the rank structure and how things are kind of laid out. And you got to keep in mind that they're not NATO. So there's a lot of things that we can't say to them, we can't do for them because they're not a part of the NATO agreement. And one of the biggest things that I'm teaching them is some counseling techniques, solution-focused counseling, really a quick and easy counseling opportunity to when a soldier comes to them and says, hey, my kids are messing up and I'm getting phone calls from my wife and I'm, this is going on. How do we get them back in the fight immediately? And so we did a lot of role play around solution focused counseling and coaching, and then looking at how to handle traumatic events, for themselves when they get into a situation where there's a battle and they've got a soldier that's gone down. How do they maintain mentally and physically in that moment when their best friend's just been killed or is hurt pretty bad? And so we go into some things pretty in depth, but we also have to slow it way down because we've got translators, and some things just don't translate from English to their language. And so we really have to be thinking in advance, okay, what are we going to talk about next? And does this translate? And can we make this relate to them in their war? And also being sensitive to the fact that, I was talking to one of the translators the other day that had gone back, and she had texted me. We were texting about some things, and she goes, I've had to be okay with the fact that I may die while I'm here. And I just thought, man, that is tough. That is a tough, and I didn't even know what to respond to that. Nothing you can to say.
That's right, isn't it? Even as a chaplain yourself, right? Mm-hmm. I went through the police chaplains. I was looking to go down that road. I did some reserve work with LAPD, and a few years ago, I went through a course on chaplains for police, and I just found that the kind of stress that they're under and things like that, and that is something that they needed. But you kind of need somebody that chewed a little bit of your dirt and is kind of on that fence of, the squeaky clean life and the other side where you have a little bit of real life. And I just think that they need that, just even when you ride along with them and you're just talking about, not really, I think that sometimes chaplain stuff is just talking. How's your, oh, I can relate to that, or their marriages or whatever it is. And just having another guy that's just like, man, I need to get some of this off. So I went through a course, a post-certified course on chaplains for police, which was really, that was unique. I haven't given up on that. If I find the right department that'll look for something. And it's, what's funny is that a lot of departments, their chaplains are, just like you said, like an older priest, or, they're going to, they're not the kind of guy that's going to chew the dirt and talk the language that you talk and that can relate to you on that level. Like, okay, hey man, I feel comfortable around this, around this guy. You know what I mean?
They want to be able to say, use whatever language they want to, and know that they're not going to be offending somebody.
Correct. Correct. I think that is, and I'm uniquely fit for that role because I have a little bit of street behind me, and I'm not the squeaky clean priest. Well, not that priests are squeaky clean sometimes, but none of us are. But I've definitely have an understanding, and then also going through a serious divorce. Being a single dad I raised all my children. I've got a lot of that kind of life behind me where I was not a weekend dad. I raised my kids and through a very nasty divorce, even after 20 years of marriage. Right. So I got a little bit of gray hair, no hair, using, the right kind of dye so you don't look like Santa Claus on the beard, that kind of guy. So I have a little bit of life behind me, and we can cut up and say, hey, listen, man, you're not talking to the squeaky clean stuff, but I can tell you that God can wash a lot of stuff, and especially if you can, talk to somebody. It's a lot because there's a lot of stress in the police world, probably just like there is in the military world.
Oh my God. And I think it's a different kind of stress because you're not necessarily fighting a war, so to speak, but you're fighting, police are seeing they're seeing bad accidents. They're seeing kids in these bad accidents that are being killed in these accidents, car accidents. They're seeing a different kind of, and it's just as bad. And, I think one of the best compliments I ever got was years ago, a friend of mine, and she didn't think that I would care much for her because of her lifestyle. She's a lesbian. And she introduced me to somebody one day, and she said, Scott's a man that just happens to be a chaplain. And I've never forgotten that she recognized that, yeah, I may be a chaplain, but I also still care about people. And I can, as you said, chew the grit,
right.
And get out there. And it doesn't mean that I give up what I believe. It's just that I understand that people have different mindsets and they come from different backgrounds. And so
that's true. And that's such a hard thing for, I guess, I don't know, that is a really good segue, because people have a tendency to think that just because we don't agree with the lifestyle doesn't mean we disagree that you're a bad person.
Right.
We just don't agree with that. We just don't agree with the lifestyle. And it's okay for us. Maybe you don't agree with our lifestyle. It's all good. That doesn't mean that, when you cut your finger, you bleed just like we bleed. When somebody cuts your heart, your heartache is no different just because you have a different belief system. So,
absolutely.
I just think that if people can understand that, I think people think that if you think my idea is bad, you're bad. You know what I mean? As opposed to, I think your idea is bad. I don't think you're bad. I just don't agree with that. You know what I mean? So, and
it can be as simple as, you like steak, I don't like steak. Or you like hamburger, I don't like hamburger. I mean, we get so caught up in this that everybody has to agree with everything and everybody, and it's I just at some point just got to call BS on it and say, look, I'm entitled to have my own beliefs. I'm entitled to have my own thoughts. Doesn't mean I don't like it. I still like you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, and to be honest with you, the church is, my brother has been a pastor for, my brother is a cop, LAPD cop. He's been one for 28 years. So he's a reserve, but he also works in child trafficking. So he works with Zoe, and he goes and extracts these kids. And, he even at his age now, let's see, I'm 8 years older than my brother. So he's 50. I don't know what he's doing, but he's still busting down doors and taking kids away and helping with that. But he was also a pastor at a church for 20 years. And so you got this pastor life and this cop life. And I think that in the Christian world, I talked to my brother about this so much that, because I find myself doing the same thing. Be honest, I tell everybody, to be honest with you, sometimes I find myself in the same situation, whereas if we got to help, feed the homeless or what we're doing, but on the same token, the ones that are coming to church, I know are pedophiles, and, based on my work and what I've done in the past, or, hey, listen, I just saw this guy pull a knife on somebody here. Or we're having a Friendsgiving at church, and the guy you're interviewing pulled a knife on me in the parking lot not but 2 months ago. And it just, I tell him, I said, there's some things I'm meant to serve on. This ain't it.
Exactly.
Okay. You need a different heart. I know too much stuff and so you have to know you have to know yourself where to serve. That is not I tell everybody, it's not my gift. You need to have somebody that's chewed the same dirt as them and try to get them out of this criminal lifestyle and what they're doing, because I think right. And then, because I'm asking God all the time, I'm like, man, I can't change my mind on it, Lord. So I don't know what. Just don't put me in the situation. That's what I'm asking him, right? I said, I don't want to go St. Peter on everybody. You know what I mean? It's just, and then I find the opposite of sometimes with Christians on how they're just so judgmental, right? And I said, I tell everybody, you want to know the worst class I ever did way back in the 90s when I started was a Christian homeschool group that I did, and they were just a nightmare. I'm like, for payment for, why would you charge us? That's not the Christian. I'm like, wow. I'm like, if I wasn't a strong Christian at that time, I would have never went to church, man, just based on what I taught. It was a nightmare.
I have seen it. I mean, I grew up in the church, I've seen it, and it is absolutely, I always laugh when I talk to waitresses and waiters at restaurants. I'm like, what's the worst day to wait tables? And they say Sunday for lunch.
There's just no way that's not true, right? The ones that should be blessing the most are the ones that are the biggest nitpickers. I'm like, oh my goodness, I just can't with it, Yeah. That doesn't surprise me one bit at all. We're in the kingdom, man. The kingdom should be what it is, man. And, the other thing, you got the flip side. It's an 80-20 rule. You got 20% of the people that do 80% of the work in a church anyway. And then 10% of those are just a solid group. It's finding those 10%, that are doing things, I think about it often with the Lord. I'm like, man, I'm going to have to stand in front of him one day, and he's going to say, good work, or pull your head out, bro. You know what I mean?
A lot of us that's gonna hear those same words.
Hey, I tell everybody, I said, I'm going to stand in front of God one day, and he's going to look at me. He's going to be, you need to thank Jesus while you're even here, bro. That's what you're going to have to do. It's just one of those things. So it's fun to make fun of them, but sometimes the truth lies in between.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about these masterminds. Let's talk about because I think it's a unique thing you have. I want to talk a little bit more about what you do. First, we'll talk about your website, so where people can find you, and these mastermind. And you kind of gravitate towards men, and you have these small groups. And I'm interested to talk to you about that, because going right back to the church, right? Most churches have these small group life groups, right? Most churches do that now. When I was growing up, we didn't really have that, but the modern church has these life groups. You go and you do, and I am not one of those guys, which I'm sure that you deal with a lot of men, unless the men has some estrogen in them. I am not going to someone's house and singing Kumbaya, and I'm going to tell you all my woes and all that. It's just not going to happen. I'm not comfortable with it, and I don't trust you to keep your mouth shut on top of it, right? And so I tell, and my pastor all the time, who's a black belt of mine, ever since he was a kid, he's like, hey, you need to come. And I tell him, Justice, I'm not doing it, man. I'm not singing. I'm not dealing with my feelings. And then he said, what happens if we do Bible beatdown or Jesus and jiu-jitsu? And so we would do life groups at my studio. And what we would do is then you get the men in here that want to fight.
Yeah. And
they would not go to church. But let me tell you something. When you bleed with another guy and you sweat and you're working out together, there's a different mentality, right? We're not with acoustic guitar in front of the fireplace, and then a lot of them have their wives with you, and for sure they're not talking in front of their wives.
Absolutely.
And there's no way. And so this is what we did. So we do an 8-week course. We teach them how to fight. At the last night, we pray, we do a little Bible study, and then we get in the cage, and anybody that wants to fight gets to fight. Wow. And so that was Bible beatdown. That was a life group called, and then it was Jesus and Jits. So we would do jiu-jitsu for 8 weeks, and then we'd have a little tournament at the end. But guys are suffering, whether it's from pornography, whether it's from aggression and anger issues. Some of them been in prison. Some of them are still doing dope. It's amazing that Bible beatdown, what started. I don't know if I told you this before, but my school has started a major church in my community. Wow. Justice, who was a black belt of mine, said, hey, man, God's calling me to do a church here in Chatsworth. And he goes, I'm starting to look for places to work. And he goes, and I said, well, my place ain't doing nothing on Sundays. You want to start it here? And so we started that church. And let me tell you, man, I've been pressed by the devil ever since I've done it. There's always some kind of something in the way. But You know what? I'm kind of a fighter, and I laugh at him all the time. I said, "You can knock me down, bro. You ain't knocking me out. I just don't care." So this all, and he was able at one point. We started the small church, and it's a studio. Next door to me is a bar, or there was at that time. And he was able to go in there and talk to the owner and get us to be able to use it because they have a whole sound system there.
Oh
so he would preach in the bar Sunday morning, and all the kids would be in my studio next door. That's how this church started. Now think about that.
That's awesome.
And now it's growing to where it feeds thousands and thousands of people on a weekly basis at the church. It has a major church there that has, I don't know, 4,000 members now. All started from this little karate studio. And, him and his wife are just really, really good. And they're young. So they have great charisma. And they have attracted, and this has happened. So this small group thing that we talk about, that's the only way you would ever get me into it. Ever. I'd have to bleed with you. We're going to, I'm not. And these type A guys like myself, or military guys like you know what I'm talking about. We're not doing that.
No.
So let's talk about how you put that together and what that looks like for guys. So what's the website that you have that you're doing?
So the website is goboldlymastermind.com. Goboldlymastermind.com. Back in 2020, I deployed to Kuwait 1st of March, and I was boots on the ground for about a week. And then if you remember, in week 2 of March, the world shut down. And so I went over for a 30 to 35 day mission. I was going to Kuwait, Jordan, Egypt, and Qatar, and running missions with different people. I was going to Jordan to meet with the Grand Mufti, going to Qatar to do some suicide prevention and intervention work, and then going to Egypt to run an exercise. And none of that happened. I got stuck in Kuwait. 30 days turned into 6 months. And while I was there, everything shut down. The gym shut down, the DFAC shut down, the dining facility shut down. We were wearing masks. If you walked, when they finally opened up the dining facility, if you walked around without your mask, the MPs were there to write a ticket, but you could sit across from somebody and have dinner, which made absolutely no sense, just as asinine can be. And so, you're getting a ticket for walking around in a dining facility with no mask on. And I'll be honest, I was part of my unit was really, we were the ones controlling who came in and out of Kuwait and Jordan. So I was at Arsent at the time. And I was privy to be a part of some very intense, very secret meetings about what was going on with COVID and everything else. And I remember just what stood out the most. I was in a meeting one time and they said, we've got 7,000 people on this base and we've got 2 ventilators. And I'm thinking, we're seeing CNN on every night and people's body bags. And all I'm thinking is we're sending 3,000 people back in body bags from here because we've only got 2 ventilators. And my thought process was I was not going back home. And I did a lot of walking around the track. They actually were going to shut the track down, wouldn't let people walk around the track. And we all kind of stood up for ourselves and said, you got to give us some way to get this pent up energy out. And the other piece of that was, we couldn't be in the dining facility without a mask, but we were bunked up four guys into a room on bunk beds. So we're like, really? So one night I was walking around the track and I was pretty defeated mentally and just doing a lot of counseling and a lot of soldiers coming in and talking about how their mother was in the hospital and may not make it. Their brother was dying, their sister, and chaplain, can I go home? No, you can't go home. It takes a 2-star approval for you to get on that plane to go home. And besides, there's no planes coming in and out of Kuwait. And I was walking around one night and I just heard the words, be bold. And I'm like, that ain't for me. And I was pretty defeated, having a lot of nightmares. And then the verse came to mind of Genesis 12:1, where God told Abram to go to the land that he would show him. He didn't say where, he didn't say what, he just said, just go to the land that I'll show you. And then the second part of that verse, he says, which is really kind of cool, that everywhere you walk, I'll make a great nation. And I just thought, that's what the world needs, is for men to go boldly, just like Abram was told to do. Just be bold, step out in faith. And that came to my mind, and I started working on that. And I've got to give credit where credit's due. There's a gentleman out of Nashville named Aaron Walker that taught me this model of small mastermind groups, and I've added my own flair to it, my own personalities to it. But it's small groups of men, and I think you hit the nail on the head that men are not willing to be vulnerable when they're at church, and there's a possibility of what's the joke that gossip only takes place when there's prayer requests in a church, but that's when everything gets told about everybody else. Well, you just want to pray for Miss Mary because she's not feeling well. She was out at the bar the other night. And men struggle with vulnerability anyway. And we're not willing to share our deepest, darkest secrets with just anybody, especially if it's, if we're going to be judged by it. And the other piece of that is, as I think about my own, just isolation. I think a lot of men in leadership roles and that are serving others, they find themselves isolated a lot because you don't want to talk to the people that you lead. You don't want to share your weakness. You don't want to share, what you're struggling with because you might be judged for it. And so that's what I've created with these small groups of men that can come together weekly. Two guys sit in the man in the middle each week. They get to bring whatever they want to the group, personal, professional, whatever they want, and they get coached around it. And it may be something with their family. It may be something that they're looking at, hey, buying another business or adding a piece of business. And they get the opportunity to be coached, be vulnerable. And the one thing, and I'll close with this, the one thing that I always say is the more vulnerable that we are as men, the more growth can take place. And I think that's the key right there.
Well, I agree with that. But in the same token, like maybe this is what you've built is a place for men to be that way.
Yeah.
It's, in our society, and I'd tell this to my young people now, if you watch any sitcom, dads are usually some, bumbling idiot, mom's taking care of the house.
Yep.
Or there's a single mom. If it's Mother's Day, there's not a corner of the streets that there's not flowers and something to give. On Father's Day, it's not even, if Father's Day isn't even celebrated, if you look down the chart, it's like down there in number 20. Okay. So we're already, we're already defeated in everywhere. And then Hollywood makes us look like just, they even made the Hulk look like a wuss. Okay. And I'm a big Hulk fan, right? And I'm watching the last ones, and I'm like, the Hulk is always angry. What are you doing? Okay, he's not this. Or you got the She-Hulk throwing stuff in his face. I'm like, no. What are we doing? Okay, I mean, we're just demeaning everything he is, for crying out loud. Now, if you're going to defeat the Hulk, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So I just see this so much over and over. And one of the things for me, and I don't know in your world, I don't know if you have a lot of military that come into your place or just regular or both, a flavor of both, or even as a chaplain. Just the simple fact that, we don't really mean to, or, there's nothing in this world that you can do without men. I mean, men pretty much built the infrastructure of where we are. Okay. Yep. I mean, let's just get real. It's not, not that, it's just what it is. It is what it is. And then you get all the other stuff thrown at us, of this woke society. This is a hard thing for men to even be bold like you are, like you talk about.
Yeah.
I was the same way during COVID. At one point, I just put black curtains up. I call them the Governor Newsom curtains, so we could work out. You know what I mean? They wanted us so much to be defeated at those times. They wanted us out of shape. They didn't want us exercising. They want us cooped up in a house. They didn't want to give us proper medicine. It was beat you down, as opposed to, hey, you need to get out there and get healthy, you guys. You need to eat healthy foods, get oxygen into yourself, get out there and walk and do things. Stupid rules like you talk about are little millennials that are going to, pounce on you every time you go into Starbucks and get a coffee and your mask is here instead of here. And you got some little 19-year-old, that you want to take their head and bounce it off the counter. Yep. And I would just remember this so vividly. And I've watched how men, their masculinity is always kind of attacked, or they're toxic, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And I just think that something like you're talking about is so powerful. So inside your group, now, are you the main leader in your group, or do you have some other guys that are coming in under these masterminds and you have like breakout rooms, or is it, when you say mastermind, is it like a life group that there's a few weeks that you do things, or how does that work?
No, so they're ongoing. So these guys will potentially, if they join a group, they could potentially be in a group for 3 to 5 years, as long as they want to stay. And because our lives are always evolving, as we grow, I'm not the same guy that I was 2 years ago. I'm not the same man that I was during COVID. And you kind of touched on something that I saw a lot of men give in to the stupidity of what was going on and cave. And I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not wearing a mask into every store. If you got a mask on, that's going to protect you. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I'm going to continue living, because when it's my time, it's my time, regardless. And so these guys, and that's really what I want to do, is bring back that masculinity and help these guys. But it takes trust, and that trust doesn't just form overnight. And so these groups are ongoing, and I've got other facilitators that are run. So as a group maxes out at 8 to 10 guys, we start a new group, and we're just continuing to run these groups over and over and over again. And each group, so we've got it set up so that the entire population of all the groups meet once a year live at a location and get to know each other. And then the small groups meet this 6 months later, just their group in person, so that they get that bonding of meeting with each other and spending a few days at a condo or someplace that, they can mastermind together. And really, there's just something about meeting face to face that really kind of builds that bond and allows for that vulnerability, allows that trust to really take it to the next level. I like to kind of refer to it as a board of directors. You can trust them. And so when you come to them and say, hey, I'm looking at expanding my business, you've got 7 or 8 other guys that have got 20 or 30 years of business experience that can speak into that and go, hey, that's a really stupid idea, and probably save somebody $100,000 to $200,000, or say, great idea, but have you thought about this? And that's really where the rubber meets the road in these groups, is those opportunities where guys get somebody else to speak into their life. And that's the power of this.
Yeah, that's such a now did you come up with this in 2020? Is this where you started thinking about this is what was needed? Did you feel that men were not bold? You said, hey, this is where I'm going to push for something for a place for men to meet, so that they can talk about whatever it is they need to talk about. Is this where this came from?
So to be completely transparent, in 2020, I've coached for years. I've been coaching for 20 plus years, people from all walks of life, right? And I've got a counseling degree, coaching certifications. I'm not a big person on counseling. I prefer coaching because I like helping people figure out the future. But during that time, while I was in Kuwait, I really began having these nightmares and anxiety attacks, and I didn't know what to do with it. And and I got really frustrated with myself because I was always telling people, anxiety attacks, it's in your mind. You got to get your mind right. You got to change it. And here I am having these things, and I'm not able to get control of it. I'm waking up in the middle of the night, and I knew that I needed something like that myself. I knew that I needed some guys to surround myself. And so in my office in Kuwait, I was able to form some relationships with a couple soldiers that we had dinner together every night. We walked the track every night. That really began to formulate that thought process of, these guys have kind of helped me walk this journey. And they had just gotten back from Iraq. And so they were dorming in my building, and it was something that I needed. And I knew that if I needed it, and the problem with being a coach, being a chaplain, being a counselor is that, who am I going to talk to? Who is somebody that's got the education that I've got the experience that I got, that I can trust, that when I say I'm struggling with this, they're not going to make light of it or make, go off and share that information. It's hard for me to find that person I trust. And so that was something that I needed at that moment. So absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting that the thought process of, anxiety and stuff like that. I caught that every once in a while. I've never had that issue before in my life. I think the same thing as you are, right? I'm like, that is some bullshit, man. That's just in your mind. You know what I mean? That, and then when I got it a little bit here and there, I was like, man, what is the deal? This panic attack thing. Why am I getting this all of a sudden?
Yeah.
I've never had it before. I learned that when I was in that mode. I did learn, like, I guess from martial arts, I just kind of stopped. When you're in jiu-jitsu, you can get in panic mode pretty, and I'm sure in the military, same thing, right? You're going to get tunnel vision and you're going to get hyperventilating because of the situation. But in jiu-jitsu stuff, and you got somebody laying on top of you and you're like, there's no way out, or you feel your air can to choke out, and you're going to like, oh man, I got to find a way out, or I got to tap out, and you're starting to have anxiety, and then you just kind of tap because you know that they'll release and you can go on, or you weather the storm and you go, and usually weather the storm means, I mean, I got to clear my mind. I got to get oxygen in my head, and I got to breathe.
Yeah.
And so I would do that, and it would relieve a little bit of it. And I found myself, now I haven't had it. I guess I got it when I got blood clots, right? And I was told that I shouldn't even be living. Wow. And this is me when I was working on Hunter in base, and I was doing the course. And I just wasn't feeling good at night. And then when I came home, I found out I had double blood clots in my lungs, and I should have been dead. And so I was like, and that kind of stuff started panicking me. Like, I'm going to wake up with a stroke or something else is going to happen. This is what kind of started my journey back in 2018 or whenever it was, 2019, losing weight and trying to get healthy and doing what I did. And I said, man, I got to, and I remember breathing, and then I'd have to get up at night, Scott, sometimes and just take a shower. I got into a cold shower and just kind of completely took myself in a different direction.
Yeah.
Because if I laid in that bed and I kept thinking about it, it would go, the room would spin, and it was like, I'm like, what am I doing? And I'm trying to talk myself out of it too, right? I'm like, what are you doing? Yep. Stop being a wuss, dude. And I remember telling myself that so much. Man, you have got some wussy shit going on in your head. What is your deal? Right?
What's going on? Yeah.
And I never had it before. So I really didn't know how to, my children, some of my kids and my daughter and stuff, super anxious about things. They get very anxious. They get, they had to, they lived through a divorced life, which I didn't do. My parents are still together today. So, they have a different life that they've lived. And I remember telling them, man, you're just going to have to talk yourself out of that. I don't know what's, there is no, at some point you have to tell yourself, and they would all tell me, Dad, you don't get it. Okay. you just, and so, I've experienced that as a guy. Right. And I know what you're talking about there. So
yeah,
maybe a place where you have that, when I first went through my divorce, I volunteered to go to anger management, because if I didn't, the Hulk was going to come out on a pretty daily basis as it was, because I was just so irate.
Yeah.
And at what my wife was doing and stuff at the time. And I was like, man, I'm not cool with any of this. Or am I going to be cool with any man coming around my children? I'm just not built for it at all. And so she wasn't making good choices anyway. And then you're not making good choices in guys. And then you're putting them in front of my daughter and my kids. And I'm like,
Yeah.
So I had to go to anger management to get some kind of, and it was a group thing. And I'm like, oh, man, group thing, man. I can't stand this kind of stuff, man. But I'm going to tell you something. Most everybody in that anger management are like me. They are like, extremely A personality,
very driven,
men that are either shooting testosterone or, and I'm thinking, I'm sitting here trying to get some of these, and this guy's talking about how he bashed his wife on the bedpost. I'm like, oh man, these guys like serious anger issues, man. They've been mandated by the court, right?
Yeah.
You're going to anger management. And Dr. Green was our thing, and he would not take any grief from anybody. He had very set rules. You didn't like it, it didn't matter. And he really gave some really good, things to use when anger would come about, and he helped me a lot. He helped me so much. I did it for 6 months on a volunteer basis. And I just felt that, you know what, I'm glad I did this. It took time, and it was way out of my comfort zone because it was a group thing. But the typical A personality men were in that group. So I definitely most of them were, weightlifters or, even coaches.
Somebody you could relate
to. One was a doctor, you know what I mean? And so I think that what you have is unique, a unique setting for guys to be able to, get together and talk. Now, tell me about, your typical mastermind weekend. I've got, a few type of men that are still quiet, and they'll be quiet for about 5 weeks.
Right.
About the 5th week, you'll see him say one thing. Yeah, they put a little crack in the thing. Hey, I want to, talk about this. And the second one is kind of like, I tell them they have an estrogen gene. They need to talk, and they just don't shut up. You know what I mean? Right. And I'm just like, right. There's those type of men. And then you've got the ones that are, a 2 to 3 week in, and they're like, hey, I'm struggling with anger, man. I just went off on my wife, and something has triggered it in order for them to talk. Something triggered that week. Those are kind of the 3 guys that I got in when I was doing Jesus and Jits and Bible Beatdown, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of pornography stuff, to deal with. I mean, men are they're just, and then of course there's underlying issues with it. Either their marriage isn't good or whatever. Communication sucks.
Yep.
Do you feel that you have that same type of mentality in your small group of guys?
So I think that all men typically struggle with something, and it takes a while for that trust to be built. But there are those that like you said, that jump in, and they've got to get a certain amount of words in every day, or they're not content. Part of when I'm interviewing, so when a guy applies to be a part of the mastermind group, they get interviewed by us, and we talk to them to make sure that they're a good fit. Because there's got to be a level of healthiness in them because I don't want this to be a mental health and a counseling situation. I want this to be a place where, even though every guy's going to struggle with something, it may not come out for a while that what you're struggling with is holding you back in this other area of your life. That may be something that the group uncovers after a while, just like a good coach does. But there's got to be a level of healthiness in these guys. And so if I find that somebody is really struggling in one area, I may make a recommendation that they see a counselor for 3 to 6 months before they join this group. Because I don't want it to be a situation where they join the group, and the group tends to babysit them every week. There's always an issue. There's always drama. There's always something going on. And the group gets, they're always taking care of this one individual. I want it to be something where there's an equal level of responsibility. There's an equal level of give and take from each member. You may not give advice every week, but you better be speaking into the life of the guy that's man in the middle for that week, sharing something, some insights or whatever. And just because here's what I've learned when I do counseling and I'm looking at groups, I'm what they call a family systems guy. I look at the entire system. So I'm looking at things from a systemic point of view. And if there's 6 guys in a group and one guy is missing that week, there's a whole piece of that group that's missing. And when that guy is missing for whatever reason, and the group is coaching somebody, that one guy could be the catalyst to springboard whoever's man in the middle to whatever they need to, that may be the missing piece. They may have the right words of wisdom. So when you take one person out of the group, they're missing for the day or they're missing for that whole system tends to kind of have a little bit of a breakdown. And that's why I like the model of ongoing, so that there's always trust and there's always outside communication as well. So,
yeah, interesting, very interesting take on that, on what that is. So you have a process for them to kind of get into the group on top of it. Do you match people up, or you start a new group and this is a new group? Because you say like you have a meeting of place, so you can have somebody on a different coast at this time is it correct?
Everything's done by Zoom. So you may have somebody from, different coast, different country in your group. And we try to match them up with the facilitator, whether it's myself or somebody else. And we also let the facilitator discuss with them before they join that group, so that it's a good match. We want diversity, so that, somebody a little bit older, somebody a little bit younger, somebody with a lot more experience, some less experience. We want some of that diversity in there to be a part of that as well. And that way it's not just 20-year-olds trying to give advice to a 50-year-old which cracks me up anyway on Facebook. These 30-year-olds that have never lived and they're giving marriage and business advice. I'm like, what the hell? You haven't even go back to bed, man.
I see this in the coaching world all the time, right? I see these young guys that are not even.
That pisses me off. That pisses me off.
It's just, I'm looking at guys at 30 years old, and and they jump on or 25, and they're trying to. They're not even married yet. Okay, you haven't even had a family. You haven't even gone through that nightmare. Okay, you not lived a life until you've watched your children, struggle in a hospital or have to get stitches, or your wife struggling, or all the stuff that goes with it, or through a divorce, and you're 25 and you're harping on, if you want stuff in life, you got to get up and get after it, and or if you attack me, then I'm just like, man, you're so young and stupid. There's
a coach out there that's been married maybe 6 years, and for the last 3 or 4 years, I've kind of watched him, and some of these guys just eat it up. He's given marriage advice, and he's been married 6 years, and I'm like, dude, you haven't even made it past the 7-year mark. Sit yourself down. You have no clue what tough is all about. So just sit down. You don't know what you're talking about.
Right. I see it all the time in the coaching world, man, all the time. And I remember as a younger guy, I would even, I'd bark at it a little bit, but now I just kind of lay back and kind of laugh a little bit and go, you have no idea what you don't know. It doesn't even matter if you made some money.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Because you haven't been through life yet where you've made money and you can lose it at the blink of an eye, just out of, or give business advice, but you don't have you ever been audited? Have you been audited where the IRS wants $100,000 and you have to go in and fight it yourself because there's no, there's not really attorneys or anything that, unless you're a major corporation that goes and does it for you. I mean, have you done that yet? You know what I mean? it's just
It's a joke.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's just an interesting thing. It's an interesting take what you have on this, on your global. So there's a process now. It looks like Carrie put out your goboldlymastermind.com. She put it out. That's the website where you can go.
Yeah,
and, so and I have, I've got even guys here, believe it or not, that struggle. That I want to make sure that they have a way to. They ask me quite often, and some of them don't want church. This might be a way for them. So now I have an avenue to do that with them. So I want to make sure that we can reach out and we have a place to go, and maybe maybe we can help some guys that I've got a lot of guys, man. I got a lot of boys that are military too, bro. And military boys are not. They talk to each other and they talk to nobody else, right? And they've, you got guys that got body counts and they're struggling, and then their marriages are whatever, man. It's brutal. And so it's good, Major, that you got somebody that can, that can chew some dirt, and a chaplain that's have a little bit of life behind them, and that you can help them. So I think this is a powerful thing. I'm glad I got to have an hour with you. Absolutely. So I'm just going to give you the last 30 seconds here, have people, where they can reach you, what you're all about, and then we'll let you get to bed here tonight.
Absolutely. So go boldlymastermind.com, or they can email me at scott@goboldlymastermind.com. I can be reached on Facebook, Scott D. Speight, and pretty easy out there to reach on Facebook. But here's the thing is, I live for those aha moments when guys in the group get the aha moment of, now I understand, mom said something, teacher said something when I was 8 years old, or whatever it might be, that they finally, the light bulb goes on and everything in their life changes. And I love when I get those phone calls 2 years later and they go, hey, it was that one conversation in this group, or it was that one guy that made an absolute difference in my life. And those are the moments that I live for, when those changes take place. And I even hate to use the word change. The word I use is transformation, because I think that you've seen it. How many guys have come to the gym and they work out for 6 months, and then they start to see the muscles, and then they quit. And a year later, you see them and they look like they've been sitting on the couch drinking alcohol and eating bonbons, and that's change, because it's temporary. And I look at transformation and I say transformation is permanent. That's when we really have something and we're moving in the right direction. So when I'm looking at guys that come in the group, that's what I'm looking for. Guys that are willing to find transformation themselves and help other guys to transform as well. And so we are looking to grow and would love to help those guys that are willing to be transformed.
Yeah, that's so good, Scott. Awesome words to end with, man. This has been a really awesome hour for me. I'm an advocate for men. I'm an advocate for men to go bold and be bold. Stop being a wussy. Stop being a cat. Is that better? Stop being a cat.
There you go. Absolutely.
And right. I tell all my guys all the time, let's get some Goya going on. Get off your ass and let's go. And so I really enjoyed the hour. Look forward to some more connections, and you have a safe deployment. We appreciate your service, Scott.
Thanks, Mark.
And we'll put it out there for everybody. This will be an audio format. Everybody else that's listening, I'll have it out in audio format for you later tonight, Scott, and you can share the audio portion of this so people can go on Spotify where they listen. It'll be on YouTube also if they want to watch it, but it'll be out there in the world for this. And I'll send you all the clips and everything that we have at the end of the day.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Mark, for having me on, brother.
All right. Thanks, sir.
You've been listening to Real Talk with Mark Cox. Real life, real topics, real conversation. We're passionate about motivation, fitness, self-defense, weight loss, and coming at it from a real angle. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you had fun. We know we did. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime,